Chapter 22. Anne is invited out to tea. "And what are your eyes popping out of your head about now?" asked Marilla, when Anne had just come in from a run to the post office. "Have you discovered another kindred spirit?" Excitement hung around Anne like a garment, shone in her eyes, kindled in every feature. She had come dancing up the lane like a wind-blown sprite through the mellow sunshine and lazy shadows of the August evening. "No, Marilla, but oh, what do you think? I'm invited to tea at the manse tomorrow. Mrs. Allen left this letter for me at the post office. Just look at it, Marilla. Mrs. Anne Shirley, Green Gables. That is the first time I was ever called Miss. Such a thrill as it gave me. I shall cherish it forever among my choicest treasures." "Mrs. Allen told me she meant to have the members of her Sunday school class in tea in turn," said Marilla, regarding the wonderful event very coolly. "You needn't give it such a fever over it. Do learn to take things calmly, child." For Anne, to take things calmly would have been to change her nature. All spirit and fire and dew as she was, the pleasures and pains of life came to her with troubled intensity. Marilla felt this was vaguely troubled over it, realizing the ups and downs of existence would probably bear hardly on this impulsive soul, and not sufficiently understanding that the equally great capacity for delight might more than compensate. Therefore, Marilla conceived it to be her duty to drill Anne into tranquility, uniformity of disposition, as impossible and alien to her as to a dancing sunbeam in one of the brook shallows. She did not make much headway as she sorrowfully admitted to herself the downfall of some dear hope or plan plunged Anne into the deeps of affliction. The fulfillment thereof exalted her to dizzy realms of delight. Marilla had almost begun to despair of ever fashioning the waif of the world into her model little girl of demure manners and prim deportment. Neither would she have believed that she really liked Anne much better as she was. Anne went to bed that night, speechless with misery, because Matthew had said the wind was round northeast, and he had feared it would be a rainy day tomorrow. The rustle of the poplar leaves about the house worried her. It sounded like pattering raindrops, and the dull, faraway roar of the Gulf, to which she listened delightedly, and other times, loving its strange, sonorous, haunting rhythm, now seemed like a prophecy of a storm and a disaster to a small maiden who particularly wanted a fine day. Anne thought that the morning would never come, but all things have to end, even nights before the day on which you are invited to take tea at the manse. The morning, in spite of Matthew's predictions, was fine, and Anne's spirits soared to their highest. "Oh, Marilla, there's something in me today that makes me just love everybody I see," she exclaimed as she washed the breakfast dishes. "You don't know how good I feel. Wouldn't it be nice if it could last? I believe I could be a model child if I were just invited out to tea every day. But oh, Marilla, it's a solemn occasion too. I feel so anxious. What if I shouldn't behave properly? You know, I never had tea at the manse before, and I'm not sure that I know any rules of etiquette, although I've been studying the rules given in the etiquette department of the Family Herald ever since I came here. I'm so afraid I'll do something silly or forget to do something I should do. Would it be good manners to take a second helping of anything if you wanted it very much?" "The trouble you are, Anne, is that you are thinking too much about yourself. You should just think of Mrs. Allen, and what would be nicest and most agreeable for her," said Marilla, hitting for once in her life on a very sound and pithy piece of advice. Anne instantly realized this. "You are right, Marilla. I'll try not to think about myself at all." Anne evidently got through her visit without any serious breach of etiquette, for she came home through the twilight under a great high-sprung sky gloried over with trails of saffron and rosy cloud, in the beautified state of mind, and told Marilla all about it happily, sitting on the big red sandstone slab at the kitchen door, with her tired curly head in Marilla's gingham lap. A cool wind was blowing down over her long harvest fields from the rims of the furry western hills, and whistling through the poplars. One clear star hung above the orchard, and the fireflies were flitting over Lover's Lane, in and among the ferns and the rustling boughs. Anne watched them as she talked, and somehow felt that the wind and stars and fireflies were all tangled up together into something unutterably sweet and enchanting. "Oh, Marilla, I've had the most fascinating time. I feel like I have not lived in vain, and I shall always feel that even if I should never be invited to tea at the manse again, When I got there, Mrs. Allen met me at the door. She was dressed in her sweetest dress, a pale pink organite, with dozens of frills and elbow sleeves, and she looked just like a serfa. I really think I'd like to be a minister's wife when I grow up, Marilla. A minister mightn't mind my red hair because he wouldn't be thinking of such worldly things, but then, of course, no one would have to be naturally good, and I'll never be that, so I suppose there's no use in thinking about it. Some people are naturally good, and others are not. I'm one of the others. Mrs. Lynde says I'm full of original sin. No matter how hard I try to be good, I can never make such a success of it as those who are naturally good. It's a good deal like geometry, I expect, but don't you think that trying so hard ought to count for something? Mrs. Allen is one of the naturally good people. I love her passionately. There are some people like Matthew and Mrs. Allen that you can love right off without any trouble, and then there's others, like Mrs. Lynde, that you have to try very hard to love. You ought to love them because they know so much and are such active workers in the church, but you have to keep reminding yourself of it all the time, or else you forget. There was another little girl at the man's tea from the White Sands Sunday School. Her name was Loretta Bradley, and she is a very nice little girl. Not exactly a kindred spirit, but still very nice. We had an elegant tea, and I think I kept all the rules of etiquette pretty well. After tea, Mrs. Allen played and sang as she got Loretta and me to sing too. Mrs. Allen says I have a good voice, and she says I must sing in the Sunday school choir after this. You can't think how thrilled I was at the mere thought. I longed to sing in the Sunday school choir as Diana does, but I feared it was an honor I could never aspire to. Loretta had to go home early because there is a big concert in the White Sands Hotel tonight, and her sister is to recite it. Loretta says that the Americans at the hotel give a concert every fortnight in the aid of Charlton Hospital, and that they ask lots of the White Sands people to recite. Loretta said she expected to be asked herself someday. I just gazed at her in awe. After she'd gone, Mrs. Allen and I had a heart-to-heart talk. I told her everything about Mrs. Thomas and the twins and Katie, Maurice, and Violetta, and coming to Green Gables and my troubles over geometry. And would you believe it, Marilla? Mrs. Allen told me that she was a dunce at geometry too. You don't know how that encouraged me. Mrs. Lynde came to the manse just before I left, and what do you think, Marilla? The trustees have hired a new teacher, and it's a lady. Her name is Mrs. Muriel Stacy. Isn't that a romantic name? Mrs. Lynde says that she never had a female teacher in Avonlea before, and she thinks it is a dangerous innovation. But I think it will be splendid to have a lady teacher, and I really don't see how I'm going to live through 2 weeks before school begins. I'm so impatient to see her.